everyone, and welcome to A Publisher's Perspective on Polishing Your Book. I'm Mike McGuire, ProWritingAid's B2B Digital Marketing Manager, and today I am here with Linda Stirling, founder of the Publishing Circle. Linda has worked in the publishing industry for decades. She is also an international best-selling author in her own right. She has written over 55 books in various genres under multiple pseudonyms, and she teaches all around the country. Her publishing house, Publishing Circle, is described as embracing a new paradigm in publishing. And Linda, do you want to talk a little bit about what that paradigm is like, just before we begin on your presentation?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Well, one of the things that I wanted to do when I started the Publishing Circle, because I've had other publishing companies, was it felt like now is the time to really create something different from everything else that I saw. And I wanted to create something that I would like as an author and not just look at it from the publisher perspective. So some of the differences, and I'm not going to get into all of them, but one of the big things is that I offer much, much higher royalties. And then I do one thing that, as far as I know, no other publisher does. And that is, out of every dollar that is made on a book, 50 cents of that dollar goes back into perpetual paid advertising. And I just don't know anyone else who's doing that. The other unique difference is I provide authors with the information that comes directly from the people who are selling the books, letting them see for themselves what those reports look like. And again, I don't know if anyone else is doing that. So those are a couple of the big differences.
Awesome. Well, it is great to hear that there are publishing houses out there now that are doing that kind of thing, and it is awesome to have you with us. So I guess without further ado, shall we go ahead and get started?
Okay, sounds good. Well, what I wanted to do first is I'm going to run through a few slides, but then I want to do some show and tell. So let me get those slides up. And Micah, if you can just let me know if everyone can see that screen.
Everything looks good on my end, guys. Can everybody see Linda's screen? If you can just pop that in the chat just really quickly. Okay.
Great. And I actually see some familiar names. It's nice to see so many participants. I really love that. So I don't want to waste any time because I've got lots that I want to share with you. One of the questions that I would have you ask yourself is, what does your manuscript convey? What's the message that an agent, if you're going through an agent first, or a publisher, would get from your manuscript? And I would say, if you are not paying attention to the editing of the work, that the message that they're getting is, it's one of two things, and maybe both. The first thing would be that you're not professional. And the second thing that would be conveyed is you expect the publisher or the agent to clean up your work. And that's not something that you want to do to get off on the right foot with a publisher or an agent if you go that route. So I also wanted to do some showing on what ProWritingAid won't catch. There's so many things that it does catch, and I rely on it as a publisher to do that. But I'm going to do a comparison between Microsoft Word and ProWritingAid, and then I'm going to show you what a professional editor would catch. So some of the things that no machine that goes over your manuscript, which it's that machine learning, no machine at this point in time is going to catch point of view issues or character motive. Maybe there isn't a good hook, or let's say that your primary character was named Brian, and later on you decided that you wanted to change his name to, I don't know, Walt. it won't catch if you've changed things around. So those are the kinds of things that you need to handle in a different way. And I'm going to address how that can happen too. The biggest thing about ProWritingAid, and I think with any program, is you still need to know language and punctuation rules. So let me just pop up the manuscript that I was going to show you. So this is from a work that I later published. And I got permission to do this because this work happens to be from my son. And so he acquiesced when I said, oh, please let me share. So this is the manuscript as it arrived. This is chapter 18. I picked one of the shorter chapters for purposes of showing you. And in this chapter, I then ran the Microsoft Word, which I would just go up to review in the Microsoft editor here. And you want to at least do that. I think you need to use ProWritingAid too. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on a ProWritingAid webinar. I really believe that. I love the program. So let's just look at what Microsoft Word caught. So as I scroll through here, you can see that there's not a lot. This one I didn't highlight, but I've highlighted some of the other things. So you can see there's some spellings. Generally, these are punctuation issues. And so I would encourage you to look at all of those. But again, you can see it's not a whole lot. And that's in the, there's 13 pages here. I'm not going to go through all of those. What I want to do now is I want to pop back over to ProWritingAid and show you, and I can't enlarge this a whole lot more, but as you can see, there's far different things, and that's just with the one setting here in the real-time setting. I can use these other settings too. But you can see over and over again, there's so much more that is caught by this program. Now, what I do when I'm doing the editing is I want to hover over these and I want to see exactly what ProWritingAid is saying. And this is where you need to know the rules. So if I'm looking at passive verbs here, passive verbs we pretty much understand, but that's a signal to how can that be improved. And as a writer, you want to first look at how you can improve those things yourself instead of considering that the publisher may make your work stronger. And then everything that I look at, I will determine if it does need to be changed or if it's fine. So I would go through this in the same way that I would go through Microsoft Word in a fresh document that I would then provide to the author. And sometimes, and you can see here, this just copied in my notes. Sometimes I would make notes. So all of those are invaluable signals to me. Now, what I do, and I would recommend that you do this as well, is once I have edited the material and the author's had a chance to review it, I then run it through ProWritingAid again. I can't tell you how many times that little things that make a difference to me as a publisher have been caught, like maybe a quotation mark was left off or a period was left off, and it will catch those things that sometimes my eyes just won't catch. So now let's look at what that manuscript would look like after I made a first pass on this. And you can see that, I took into consideration a lot of the things that were shown in ProWritingAid, but I also made other changes. Here's a point of view suggestion. Lots of other comments. So I want you to think about this scenario. Let's suppose that the author didn't even use Microsoft Word, didn't use ProWritingAid, and sent me everything. My work as a publisher, and when I'm wearing my editor hat, would be so much more work for me, so that I might miss some of the other things that I would like to catch. So that's why you really want to run your manuscript through, I think, both programs. That's going to send a message to the agent and the publisher that you're a pro, that you know what you're doing. So there's another thing that you can do, and I thought that this might be useful to everyone. So I'm going to pop back over to my slides here. And I'm going to talk about ways that you can find some of those other things that I talked about. The point of view issues. If you're not well versed in point of view, that might be a big area where you make errors. I know it is for a lot of authors. Or changes with the character's name, those sorts of things. So what I recommend that every author does is they build what's called a beta, or in some areas of the world, they call it beta. I call it beta reader team. So a beta reader team is going to look at your book after you've done everything that you can do with it. So you don't want to give them your sloppy version. You want to give them your best work, just like you would do with the publisher or the agent. So there's different terms tossed around for teams that are involved with writers. There's the beta readers. There's the ARC team. That's your advanced reading team. And typically those are set up so they will leave a review on the first day of your release. And then there's something called a street team, also known as a launch team. And they're your people who are going to go out and just spread the word about your book. We're going to focus on how beta readers might help you. So they can definitely catch embarrassing mistakes. They can give you that cleaner copy for your editor. Something else, and I'm going to show you how they might do that, is they can help you determine if your book really is appealing and what might not be working. If you've got the right kind of beta reader team, they can see if you've hit genre tropes. They can point out areas that weren't developed well, and just a whole lot more. So when you want to engage your team, is you want to think about, and this is going to be different if you're self-publishing than if you have a publisher. But let's assume that you're self-publishing. If you are, you want to work backward from the time that you want to publish and allow enough time for you to make changes, do any rewrites, anything like that. As I said earlier, you want to make sure that you're giving this team your finest work, and you can potentially add more beta readers after the initial group reviews the manuscript. So if you've done a lot of rewriting, I would then get fresh eyes on that. So your candidates that are going to be your best candidates with books, or with reviewing your manuscript are people who read a lot. You don't want someone who reads a book a year or a couple of books a year. You want someone who is an avid reader. They're going to have, just by the pure lieu of the fact that they read a lot, they're going to automatically know some things about flow and character development, some of the things that people who don't read very much are just not going to pick up on as readily, if at all. And this is really important, you want people who read in your book's genre. And then, of course, you want people who are going to be reliable, that they're going to follow through with everything that you've asked them to do. You want people who are willing to be honest, but are not abrasive about that. You know, our writing egos, we don't need anybody beating up on us. So with your, one of the things that I didn't list here is, I didn't say, please ask your friends and your relatives. They are not your best candidates. They are not going to be as critical. And you want people who are going to provide the kind of value that you need in rewriting, and as well as catch things. So there's some places where you can find these people. One of the places is a writing group, if you have an active writing group. One of the things I would discourage you about, though, with the writing group is if you don't have a writing group that focuses solely on your genre, then you may not want to ask everyone in your writing group if they're interested. You can ask other authors, again, who are writing in your genre. If you belong to a book club that reads a specific genre, then you may want to ask people in your book club. Social media can be a good place. I'm going to show you how you determine whether these people are a good fit or not. But some social media groups, especially if there are other authors who are writing in your genre, you have to be a little careful. You don't want people who feel that they have to, really overdo what they're trying to get across. But you'll discover that as you get into some of the reviews that they make. And then referrals. If you know other authors who have a beta reader team and they can recommend someone as being a good beta reader. Now, I do list family and friends if they fit the other criteria. They read in that genre, they read a lot, then they may be a good candidate. And the final one that I've listed here is one that I actually use in my publishing company, and that's advertisements. So I will sometimes run ads on like Craigslist or other places. But the place that I've found that's the best, and I know with everything that we've got going on right now, it's a little hard to get into some libraries. But when libraries are really flowing again, then that can be a really fantastic source. And what I do in these ads is I let people know that I'm looking for beta readers, and I specify the genre. So when they reply, and when I run the ads, I say, and of course this is up to you, but I say that this is a paid position, that they will be reading one book in whatever genre, and that they will be required, excuse me, to answer questions about that. So when they apply, then the next step is I ask them to list 10 books in the genre that that I'm wanting them to read for. Or sometimes I will list 10 books and ask them, which of those books. And actually, usually that works a little bit better because I don't have to do as much homework because I know those books. But I'll ask for them to tell me which of those 10 books they've read. And then and so at this stage, everything is just, over email. Then I ask them to phone me. So asking them to phone me tells that they're willing to follow through on that. But then I do one other thing. I tell them that I am interested in having them be a reader, but that I will be emailing them some questions and I need them to answer within an hour. And the reason I ask for them to answer within an hour is so they don't have time to read the books and get the answers because they want to be paid to participate in this. So they would have previously specified which books they had read. And then I'm ready with some questions like in whatever title, how did the protagonist solve some scenario. So asking very specific questions so I know if they've really read the books or not. And surprisingly, a lot of people have not read the books that they say they've read. So then I winnow things down until, in my case, and I pay people just $25 to read the book and then report. And in my case, I usually have, as a publisher, around 10 people to do that, 10 to 12. You probably don't need that many. I would say 3 to 4 people to do that. And then you need to have a list of questions that you'll be asking those beta readers. You also want to make sure that you have clearly written out the expectations. When you have that phone call with them, you discuss those expectations over the phone as well as have them written out. You've determined the format of the critique, the method of response. Do you want everything in writing or will you do it on a phone call? That's totally up to you. I like to have things in writing. And I think this is really important, both from the standpoint of, really knowing what's working well, but also if this is you as someone who's not the publisher, you need some positive criticism on this that is really, really helpful for you. And then establish a due date. And then, of course, pay them after they've done all of those things. Your responsibilities are to make sure that your manuscript is already the best you can make it. You've been clear about your expectations and you've set reasonable timeframes. So some people may read very quickly and others may take longer. I wouldn't extend it out past a couple of weeks. And then understand too that sometimes these beta readers, life happens. So they might have something happen where, and I've had this with the beta readers that I've used, something happens that they really don't follow through on one book, but they might on another. So if you're writing multiple books, a reader that had some situation that was beyond their control might actually be a good beta reader for you in the future. You're providing specific questions in advance. And then here's a really important one, and I've seen this happen a lot, and I've seen it happen in critique groups where people are not humble about the criticism. They get really defensive because they're so close to their work, or they'll they'll say things like, well, you would have found that out if you would have read to chapter X. You want to keep your mouth shut when you're getting the critique of the work, because these people are looking at your book as if they had picked it up off the bookshelf in the bookstore or ordered it online, and you're not going to be there to tell them that that's resolved in chapter 21 or whatever. So just be polite. You don't have to take all the criticism that's offered. You need to remember that, but you should be humble about that's given. And then really important is let these people know that you appreciate them. Some of the requests that I would make, and I go a little deeper into this in just a bit, is I ask people to mark any spots where they felt compelled to keep reading, if there are any. If there's a spot that seems boring or slows the story down, to make a note of it. If they just didn't like the book, to explain why. And I tell them in advance that answers like I didn't like it are not going to be helpful. So here's a list, and I'll show you in a little bit a way you can get a list of my questions. But here's a list of sample questions, or you can write these down too. Did the opening chapter capture your attention? Why or why not? What did you think about, and you can make this list every single character if you'd like. Could you easily tell characters apart? Were there spots that felt repetitive or explained too much? Is there information that you felt wasn't needed? Were there areas that weren't developed enough? Now, that might mean that it's for a series, and so that would be a good indication that you were actually on the right track, but you want that information. Does the dialogue feel realistic? Were there any points that confused you? Was anything incomplete? Did you feel that you knew where this story was going? Were you surprised at any point? If so, where? Were there any plot holes? How did you feel when you finished? This is a really important one, I think. And then finally, what would make this work stronger? And you might have other questions that you would add too. So one of the things that I do is I do, for the people who really go above and beyond and give me sometimes pages of information about a book that I'm having them look at, is I'll give them an additional, of course, in my case, I'm paying them. You may not have to pay people, and you certainly don't have to have as many people looking at each book as I do as a publisher. But I like to give them some small additional, I do gift certificates because I don't know what people will actually use. Sometimes I'll do something like enter people into a drawing for a bigger prize. If they've really contributed a lot, you may want to acknowledge them in the book. If you're having a launch party, you may want to invite them. And your lunch parties can be both virtual or in person. And I would think that you should at least provide a signed copy of the finished book. Now, you may not feel you need to do that if you're paying them. So these are all optional. What I don't think is optional is, I think even if you're paying them, it's really nice to send a handwritten thank you note. Now, one of the reasons that, a very selfish reason that I do this is, as a publisher, if these people are really good at what they do and they're providing value to me, I'm probably going to use them in the future. The other thing that happens for you as a writer is if you've got an amazing team that's doing this kind of work to go beyond what Microsoft Word certainly, or even ProPublishing can do, these people, having read the book, having connected with you, they're good candidates to be spreading the word about your book. So they may take on other roles with you as a writer, roles that could really help you in your writing career, could help you on, if this is your first book, for this book and for other books in the future as well. And I think I pretty much explained this. They can potentially provide a lot of added value. Okay, so I'm going to look at questions now. I did want to offer, I've got a trial, and my URL shortener was not working this morning, so I went ahead and spelled this all out. But you can always email me if you don't write it down, and I'll pop it in the chat box too. But at this URL, you can get a not free trial, it's a $1 trial of my leading membership site for authors. Now that site is one where I've had the same kind of information. I've taught writers like Lorena Angel. She was selling 6 books a day when she first started working with me. That quickly went to 60 books a day. Or David Crow, he's the author of The Pale-Faced Lie. He studied the same information that I have inside Author Camp, and he went on to win a lot of awards for his book. And the last time I checked, he was making just under $30,000 a month. Now, I don't promise that you can make that from taking the course, but just under $30,000 a month from one book. So I know the information is valuable, and that is the free trial. Oh, and great. I can see Micah pop the link in. Thank you, Micah. So that's everything that I wanted to share. And I would assume we probably got some questions.
Yes, absolutely. And Linda, I did just want to note for everybody that in case you were trying to type that link in case you did not get to catch it in the chat, that is case sensitive. That is a capital X, lowercase m as in meat, W as in water, E as in eagle, M as in meat, 8, P as in pop, Y as in, goodness gracious.
You.
Yes, there we go. So, and out of those, that is a capital X and a capital P and a capital Y at the end. Everything else is lowercase.
Well, and I'm sorry that my bit.ly link sent me to a 404 page this morning, and I wanted to make sure everyone had that. If you have any trouble getting in, email me. I'm easy to reach, just linda@thepublishingcircle.com, and I'll respond and get you set up.
And everyone, you should have the link now. It basically just went through to panelists that first time, so if you don't see the link, let me know. And this should also be included in your recording follow-up. So Linda, I am going to go ahead and jump into questions. And the first one that I wanted to pop in on was just, will we be able to share the slides with our attendees?
Yes, I'll make those available. They'll be in a PDF form.
Okay, all right, great. So guys, we will hopefully be able to share that with you via the recording link. And then a great one that actually touches on a question that I was curious about.
Before you go into that question, I forgot to say one thing. Anyone who signs up for the trial, I'll send that checklist of questions to ask, so you won't have to worry about typing it all out.
Okay, awesome. But one of our attendees actually had a great question that I was curious about, because I'm actually getting prepared to do all of this beta reading fun in probably November. So I can be distracted by NaNoWriMo while people are giving me feedback. How many beta readers do you suggest having as a standard novel? I guess each round, I know you said that there's some differences between a publisher versus someone who's getting ready for an agent or getting ready for a publisher. Is there a difference maybe between the number you should have as someone who's considering self-publishing versus someone who's considering submitting to an agent? Well, what are your kind of recommendations on that front?
Well, I mean, there's no rule on what you should have. I think that you should have a minimum of 3. That gives you 3 different perspectives. If you are self-publishing, if you're self-publishing, you should be doing the same things that a publisher is doing. I can tell you that I have always at least 10 people who are reviewing a book. You want that same kind of professionalism if you're self-publishing. And that's opinion. You can do whatever you choose, of course.
Right. And I am also curious, what happens if you get conflicting opinions from readers? What if you have, on that panel of 10, you have 5 that absolutely love a certain section versus you have 5 that absolutely hated that same section? How do you kind of reconcile conflicting opinions when you're talking to your beta readers?
Well, ultimately, you're the author, and you have to decide if you find a truth in that. I would say if it's that evenly divided, that that something didn't work as well as it could. So I would go back and look at that and try and determine what that might be.
Okay. Well, guys, do we have any more questions? I think we've gotten through a lot of the Q&A so far, but I believe, Linda, you may have been so thorough, we have all of our questions answered here.
Well, and I did kind of hurry through everything. I would say too that you want to, if you're self-publishing, you want to look at setting up. You remember I went through the different groups that you have: your beta readers, your launch team, all of the different ones. If you're self-publishing, you want to set those up way in advance. One of the things that I see happening with writers is they wait until they're totally finished with the book. Then they expect everyone else to hurry. And you want to be forming alliances a few months ahead of totally finishing, getting things lined up. Another reason that you want to do that is you want to be looking at getting the people lined up to start leaving reviews when you launch your book. Now, a publisher is not going to line up people to leave reviews. That's your job as an author. So start building relationships where you can have people leave reviews as soon as your book is launched. And in that same vein, Amazon has previously never disclosed how many books that they recommend that an author has until lately. And now they're saying that books with at least 15 reviews get a little more clout. So have those people lined up.
Okay. We have actually got another question that is kind of just touching on the format that you're giving your beta readers, basically your manuscript in. And this user is asking, are we simply giving photocopies out? How is that format generally handled?
That's a great question. And one of the things that I do is I ask people if they use Microsoft Word so that they can make their comments right in the manuscript, and I don't have to hunt for everything, and I can quickly cruise through them. Now, if you've got a small reader team, they may want just to have a printout. So it really depends on what your beta readers are wanting. Either will work. Once in a while, I've seen authors do a bound preliminary manuscript for readers. That can get really expensive right now if you've got very many people involved, but that's an option too.
Okay. And Linda, I believe you mentioned the beta reader questions would be sent to anyone who signs up for that trial, correct?
Yes, I'll send out all of those questions, and then you can add your own too, because every book is unique, and you're going to have questions that would only be relevant for your book.
So, and then that will also, we'll also have the slides sent out with our recording copy as well. So you should have those as well.
Yes.
And we have another great question from a attendee on how manuscripts should be formatted. And they're asking where they should find the information on how to format their manuscript. And are there differences between genres?
That I'm always happy when people ask that question, because as a publisher, I don't want your manuscript set up. I don't want it to look like it's going to look in a book. It shouldn't have headers and footers, all of those things, because then as a publisher, I have to go to the trouble of stripping all of that out before it goes to the interior designer. So basically, it looks like just a double spaced, no page. Now, this is different than it used to be in the past when you'd mail off a manuscript. But for the manuscripts that come in via email, which most do these days, you don't put any page numbers or anything else on it at all. It's just your chapter headings, and you can use a heading feature like heading 1, heading 2 on those, and then double spaced. Don't do any indents, just an extra space between paragraphs. So really, really bare bones. That's going to keep your publisher a lot happier, because they don't have to go through or have someone go through and change everything because you've wanted your manuscript to look pretty.
Right. And also going to recommend for anyone looking to submit to agents, of course, check house formatting standards. Oftentimes they will have those listed whenever you make your submission with your query letter and everything else. So this can vary. It'll vary probably if you're sending to a small press versus if you're sending to an agent versus if you're self-publishing yourself. So just all things to note, just always double check your standards when you can. Another great question here is on giving the same group of beta readers 2 different versions. So let's say you get done with having a ton of rewrites on a book, and maybe you're wanting their feedback on the changes. Would there be a case for doing that?
I think it's hard for beta readers to see the same material and comment again on that material. So I personally like to send out, if there's significant changes, I send out to a different group of readers. It depends on what you're able to do. If you only have a small group of readers and you don't see yourself getting more, then I would try it. So it's going to be on an individual basis. But I think people reading something for the first time are going to give better input than people who've read and reread.
Makes perfect sense. We've got another couple of questions that go back to touching on that formatting. They're asking about that we would have no indentations and no page numbers on that formatting. Assuming, Linda, that's your house style rule, right?
Yeah, that is my house style. And like you said, Micah, some people may vary from that. I can say that most publishers, because I've had other publishing companies and I was executive editor for another house, most of them want what I just described. Unless you are sending a typed material, you don't put page numbers, because if you think about it, when the manuscript then goes to the interior designer, that manuscript, your double double spaced sentences are no longer going to be double spaced. So your page numbers are going to change anyway. And a lot of things are going to be changing with the formatting of that manuscript by the interior designer. So having that kind of really clean, easily maneuverable copy is what works best.
Okay, fantastic. And another great question here. You guys are just coming in with just all sorts of fantastic questions today. Finding out expectations for word counts for different genres or different age groups. And I know this has always been a tricky one for me because I write fantasy, which has a very large range.
It has a huge range. One of the things, and that's a really great question, but one of the things that is happening right now is the printing costs went up because paper costs went up. And so those longer books are now not being as desirable for publishers. I just did a whole presentation on this, and it's in my Facebook group of the same name, the Publishing Circle, if you want to listen to that, about the increases in costs and how that I actually broke down what it meant on what you could make on your book. So if you don't know your pricing in relation to, and most writers will just pick what they see other people selling their books for, and they don't actually take the time to know what they need to sell their book for in order to make a profit. So you want to do that. So coming back to the original question of, what the length should be. So a novella is going to be between 10,000 to 40,000 words. Adult fiction, both commercial and literary, is going to run between 80,000 and 100,000 words. And I would suggest, if you can, you stay closer to the 80. Science fiction and fantasy fiction. Now that is the one that it's a lot harder, but they're usually between 90,000 to 120,000. But what I would consider is having a great hook and breaking up some of those longer books so that you've got 2 books or 3 books, and series always sell better in that genre, those genres, science fiction and fantasy. I think with the changes in paper costs, that's going to become more common, and the really thick books are not going to be as common, because when you break down those numbers and know what your royalty is going to be, it really starts to change when you get up in those higher numbers. Let's see, then romance is usually between, and there's so many differences in romance, but between 50 and 100,000. Historical fiction would be right around 100,000. What did I leave out?
Mystery, I believe.
Mystery, thrillers, horror, that's going to run between 70 and 90. And then young adult between 50 and 80. And children's books, you need to follow the guidelines of the publishers on those.
And actually, just touching on that subject with children's books, is if you had illustrations for, say, a picture book, how is the formatting done for that? So I suppose, letting the publisher know which picture connects with what text.
Well, first of all, most publishers won't accept pictures provided by the writer. The majority of children's books publishers want to come up with their own artist for the book. If now I've accepted work in my company where I then work with the artist, because just because someone is an artist doesn't mean they know how to format books, how to format books, period. And it can be costly if it is not done right.
Makes perfect
I
sense.
left out nonfiction. So I'm kind of looking behind me at the books
Mhm.
I've got. Nonfiction's all across the board on word count. So I didn't want to not mention it.
We have a couple of more questions. One is on, does an author have any say in the design of a book whenever it goes to a publisher?
It depends on the publisher. So the bigger publishers, you absolutely don't. A lot of the mid-list publishers, you don't. Some of the indie publishers, you don't. Um, I work with the author on the making the decisions because I want the author to be as happy with the book as I am. But you want to find out those things in advance. Don't sign your contract until you know how involved you can be. And some authors don't want to be involved. They just say, you're the pro and you know what to do. So go ahead and, do what you think is best. So there's a lot of variables there, but if it's important, get that in your contract.
Okay. And we have one more on, do you always need an agent if you are submitting your book to a publisher? Goodness, we are just coming in rapid fire. I answer one and get two more. Fantastic.
Well, I love helping writers, so the however many questions there are, I don't mind. So the answer is no, you don't always need an agent. It depends on the publishing house. So you'll find when you do your research whether they require material to come through an agent or not. It's getting harder to find agents because publishers are just not accepting as many books. More people are self-publishing or going with the indie publishers because they want more control over their work.
We have a couple of throwbacks here. One is just back to the question of word count. With a historical novel that is about 85,000 words, would that word count be enough of an issue to be cause for rejection, or is that something that, there's a little bit of wiggle room on those recommended counts?
Oh, there's definitely wiggle room. Those are all generalities. What I look at and what I think every publisher looks at is the story told well? I mean, if you are trying to plump up your story to 100,000 words because you think that that's a rule that you have to meet, and by plumping it up, the story isn't as crisp and as engaging, then you're hurting yourself to do that. So you want to just write the absolute best story that you can. Story and how that comes together is always going to be the most important element.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure very polished, query or submission letters, and basically a very polished, first 10 to 15 pages, whatever is requested to, can't hurt.
Right. And let me say that because you mentioned 10 to 15 pages. Now with nonfiction, you can get away with not having a completed book. But with fiction, you actually have to have your entire manuscript done. So just having 10 or 15 pages written won't fly. And the agent or the publisher, you'd be writing the query. You wouldn't, in every case I can think of, you would not be providing any part of your manuscript until that's requested. And then you'd be requested to send the entire manuscript.
Fantastic. And one more question on formatting as far as font sizes and basically font choices. What is generally accepted standards?
Font sizes, I would say use probably between 11 and 12. I mean, publishers are really not going to care that much about that because they'll look at the total word count and see, that's the first thing, see if it falls in a reasonable proximity of what the genre should be. It's because everything is sent email pretty much across the board now. We can we can make the screens larger or smaller if we need to. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. And just Arial is fine. Again, font sizes, just don't use anything fancy.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, guys, I think we may have all of our Q&A answered. If you have anything else, go ahead and pop it in the chat. We'll give it just a moment, but I think we can begin wrapping up. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. Linda, that was a wonderful session. It was lovely to hear all of this advice that you had for all of us. Great Q&A, and I think everyone got a ton out of it, so it was great having you on with us.
Super. Well, I loved being here, and I appreciate all the great questions. And as always, it's just my goal to try and be helpful to writers, because I'm a writer too, and I like giving really straightforward answers.
Well, you certainly do, and I'm sure everyone got a ton out of it. So we will go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, have a great day.